The following is an Operation Podcast production.
I was awarded the Nobel Prize in Medicine for the work. Every male patient who was on the drug, although they got a decrease in their blood pressure, developed an erection. The nurses were very aware of that in the clinic. And one of the most important factors that leads to diabetes is a deficiency in nitric oxide.
Viagra stops working after a while. People get too casual with it. There are serious side effects, one of which is hearing loss. Is there any truth to this?
Some. First of all...
Have you heard of the carnivore diet?
Yeah,
They only ever eat meat, usually red meat.
Which is a deadly diet.
Can we say Mediterranean food is the best way to live?
There's no question about it. But in serious respiratory distress situations, the inhalation of nitric oxide gas can work, right?
If I inhaled a little bit of nitric oxide, would I get a breathing enhancement?
Yes.
Would it optimize my lung capacity?
Oh, yeah. Because NO is antiviral, not just vasodilator and this and that. We make NO to kill viruses in our body to sustain our lives.
Why have I not heard? Why has no one heard about this?
Hi, my name is Lou Ignarro. I am a professor of pharmacology and physiology, and I am here to talk about nitric oxide. And I want to welcome everyone to EverForward Radio.
Hey everybody, welcome back to EverForward Radio. I have a repeat guest here today. I'm so excited to invite back on the show. And we're doing this really for you, especially on YouTube. This video over the last year has just been popping off. We are about a year old, over 234,000 views as of April here, 2024, and nearly 5,000 likes. One of the most popular videos I put out on YouTube for the podcast. Dr. Lou, welcome back to the show.
Well, thanks, Jace. It's great to be back here, and I'm so happy to learn that so many people are interested in nitric oxide. Not me necessarily, but nitric oxide.
Well, if you don't know, if my audience is unaware of who you are, can you give us a brief recap as to your expertise and professional history?
Of course, yes. I went to medical school and graduate school, but focused on graduate school. So I have a doctorate degree, a PhD in biology and pharmacology. My research has always been in the cardiovascular system. And so right from the get-go, I started trying to figure out what causes high blood pressure, what causes diabetes, what causes coronary artery disease, and so on. And by just working hard and pursuing my dreams of trying to unravel all this, I was able to discover that our bodies produce a very magical molecule, if I may call it that, called nitric oxide, or NO. And this is a molecule we produce that works to protect us against all kinds of cardiovascular disease.
And quite the humble man. If you heard in that story, he left out a very interesting detail. Nobel Prize recipient for the discovery of nitric oxide in the human body.
Right, yes. I was I was awarded the Nobel Prize in Medicine for the work. And the two criteria for the Nobel Prize, which most people don't know, is one, you have to have made an original first-time discovery. So my discovery was that the body makes nitric oxide, but that's not enough. The second requirement to be considered for the Nobel Prize is that your discovery has to be of obvious benefit to humankind. And of course, we know that nitric oxide can save your life, can extend your life. Many drugs now work through a nitric oxide mechanism. And that's why I was awarded the Nobel Prize.
Congratulations again.
Oh, thank you.
That's quite the feat. And for anybody that is unfamiliar about nitric oxide, I'm sure we'll get into this a little bit more. The format of this episode is I'm going to kind of bring our attention back to nitric oxide, what it is, why it's important. But really, we're going to be answering quite a few questions from that first video that people are so curious about in terms of why is it important, how can I create it, how can I get it, and a few other things. So just to kind of set the tone, just pulled a definition from Google. NO, nitric oxide, is a gas formed by combining nitrogen and oxygen. It occurs naturally both outside and inside the body. Outside the body, nitric oxide is a colorless, sweet-smelling gas that is toxic at high levels. inside the body, it acts as an important chemical messenger involved in many bodily functions. Did Google get it right? Would you add or subtract anything?
Yeah, Google's getting better and better over the years, so they got it right with nitric oxide.
So my first question, or our first question, is how can it, NO, affect pre-diabetics?
Oh, in a very favorable way. The thing to remember is that there are certain factors in the body that lead up to diabetes or pre-diabetes. And one of the most important factors that leads to diabetes is a deficiency in nitric oxide, when your nitric oxide levels are low. So if one could maintain at least normal levels of nitric oxide, then the likelihood of one developing diabetes, especially type 2 diabetes, is quite low. And the thing is this, that if people adapt an unhealthy lifestyle, meaning poor diet, no physical activity, mostly a sedentary lifestyle, these are the factors that lead to a decrease in nitric oxide, well known for the last 25 years. And when you lower your nitric oxide levels, you lower the protection that the nitric oxide has to prevent the development of diabetes. So if your NO is normal, you probably won't get diabetes. I mean, there are always exceptions to these rules.
Sure.
But in general, what you want to do is have normal nitric oxide levels. So the question was, what can NO do in pre-diabetics?
Yeah, and how can nitric oxide affect pre-diabetics?
Yeah, it can improve their condition, no question about it. It can certainly slow down and delay the development of a full-blown diabetes. So if someone is a pre-diabetic, then the key thing the physician should tell them is you must immediately embark on a healthy, balanced diet, and we can talk about that later, healthy, balanced diet, and please put some physical activity in your life, even if it's just walking 3 or 4 days a week. That will do it.
And correct me if I'm wrong, I haven't looked at the charts in a little while, but I believe pre-diabetes is considered an A1C of 5.7 to 6.1, I think?
Yes, in
around
that range.
6, yeah.
Yes, around 6, right.
So
right.
Is it safe to say that if someone is pre-diabetic, meaning they have an A1C within that range, is it safe to say then that most likely they have low NO levels as well?
Yes, right. Where it's been examined clinically, everyone with a high level of hemoglobin A1C, or just call it A1C, those patients have lower levels of nitric oxide in certain areas of the cardiovascular system. And looking at it another way, and where it's been examined, those people with normal levels of hemoglobin A1C have normal production and action of nitric oxide. So that's why, this is a very strong association. And other research has shown that there's no question about it. When the nitric oxide level is low, the protection is lost. There are a variety of metabolic changes, which I won't get into, and that causes problems which cause a rise in hemoglobin A1C.
And we're going to get into this a little bit later on in terms of ways to naturally, i.e. internally, boost or create more NO, or even, foods and supplementation. But aside from that, it should make sense that we increase nitric oxide production and therefore can reduce or get out of that pre-diabetic range by means of the best way to create more NO is through what you're talking about, physical activity, strength training, exercise. That's really how the body creates more of it naturally. So
naturally, yes.
Increase healthier lifestyle through activity and exercise boosts NO, and therefore it gets you out of that pre-diabetic range.
It's a simple answer. That's what I tell people, and most of them don't believe me because they say, well, it can't be that simple. And I go, well, why can't it be that simple? See, people are looking for a magic drug, a magic bullet. They want to be able to eat their hamburgers and not get up and jog.
They have it now. It's
and
called
then
Ozempic.
take a pill, and that's going to cure them. The Ozempic, yes, that drug will aid one in losing weight. That's for sure, losing weight.
GLP-1 agonists. Yeah.
Exactly. But just losing weight, I'm afraid, is not going to do it, because you're going to still develop, diabetes.
Right.
If you don't do anything to boost your nitric oxide while you're losing weight, you will lose weight, but years down the line, you're going to still develop cardiovascular disease. Now, Ozempic has been out a short time.
It was a diabetes drug first, and now it's off-label for weight loss.
We have to wait 20, 30 years to see the results of Ozempic in decreasing the incidence of cardiovascular disease. We're not going to see that for a long time. You can't do a study in 2 or 3 years and say, Ozempic prevents cardiovascular disease. No, you have to. What does it do? It does a number of things that allows you to lose body weight. But the smart patient and the smart physician will tell the patient, take advantage of the Ozempic. While you take the drug and lose weight, increase your physical activity, switch your diet over to a healthy, balanced diet, and between the Ozempic and those two other more natural phenomenon, you're going to be very healthy.
It's a great start, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. Amazing. Okay, so number 2, the second question. Viagra stops working after a while. People get too casual with it. There are serious side effects, one of which is hearing loss. Is there any truth to this?
Some. First of all, there's very, very little evidence that taking Viagra leads to the development of tolerance to the drug. Tolerance means you're responding less and less to the drug. If you look at the clinical literature, the evidence for the development of tolerance to Viagra, the normal recommended dose, which is 50 milligrams, for a man to take, there's very little evidence. And what most urologists believe is that the tolerance to the drug, it's not the tolerance to the drug that's developing, but it's the worsening over time of the erectile dysfunction.
Oh, interesting, really?
They're happening together. So you can't blame the Viagra for the tolerance. Instead, the ED, the erectile dysfunction, is getting worse. Remember now, folks, Viagra does not cure ED. It does not reverse ED. It has nothing to do with the disease. What Viagra does is allows the man to get an erection when he can't really get one because he has erectile dysfunction. So it increases the ability to get the erection, but it has nothing to do with treatment of the disease.
Can you maybe, Dr. Lou, walk us through a high-level understanding of what is happening with erectile dysfunction? Now, again, we did touch on this quite a bit in the first episode, but just so people are clear now.
Well, and people forget. Well, erectile dysfunction, most forms. There are many different forms, but let's focus on the most common form of erectile dysfunction is brought about by failure of the nerves that attach to the erectile tissue in the penis. They're not functioning normally, and they're not releasing their neurotransmitter. All nerves release a chemical called a neurotransmitter. And that neurotransmitter then produces a function on the organ that the nerves are attached to. In the case of the erectile tissue, the nerves are releasing, as we first found, nitric oxide. And the nitric oxide is a vasodilator, right?
Meaning it expands.
It expands the blood vessels.
Expands our blood vessels.
So what happens when you expand blood vessels? They fill up with blood. I don't have to explain how that relates to erectile function, okay? That's how Viagra works. So in patients with ED, erectile dysfunction, for some reason that's now becoming clear, the nerves are not releasing enough nitric oxide. So a normal erection cannot be obtained in order to, perform sexual intercourse or anything else for that matter. And so what we understand now are the factors that can lead to this decrease in nitric oxide release from the nerves. And once again, what is it? It is a poor diet and a lack of physical activity. the poor diet and the lack of physical activity is very strongly associated with erectile dysfunction.
How would you define poor diet? What do you mean by that?
A poor diet is not eating enough fruits and vegetables, which naturally boost your nitric oxide tremendously. And it's eating the wrong kinds of carbohydrates. Carbs are good. Fruits and vegetables are carbs. But so is refined sugar. So is sugar, potatoes, potato chips, and all the packaged carbs
Mostly
out there.
processed foods we're
Mostly
talking about, yeah.
processed foods. That's a big problem. And also, it's important to eat protein, but it's important to eat healthy protein.
How do you define healthy protein?
Well, let me tell you what healthy protein is not.
Okay.
A nice fatty Wagyu beef or steak.
You're saying
saturated fat. Saturated fat is a big problem, and we can get into that later.
There's a lot of controversy about that. A lot of people feel like it's not as big of a demon as a lot of people make it out to be.
It depends. Well, it depends who a lot of people are. They're not cardiologists, I assure you. Ask a handful of cardiologists. Now, it just depends how you look at that. Some saturated fat may be worse than others. And there's also, saturated fat in your body, when you eat it, leads to the formation of something called free radicals. I don't know how many viewers know that. You can look that up. You can Google that. Or if you use GPT, that is an amazing tool to learn something. I use it all the time.
Really?
I've tested it, and I tested it asking it questions about myself and my work, and got it right every time. So that's good. But no, saturated fats, the fat in certain cuts of beef, for example.
Any fat that is solid at room temperature.
Yeah, any fat that is solid at room temperature in the body is oxidized. It undergoes oxidation, metabolism to free radicals. So if you have a steak once a week, maybe even a couple of times a week, probably is not a big problem. But some people eat hamburgers and all kinds of meats that have saturated fats every day.
Yeah, people have you heard of the carnivore diet?
Yeah,
they only ever eat meat, usually red meat.
Which is a deadly diet, okay? And I'm happy to criticize that because you need to consume about 1/3 each of the major food groups, which is protein, carbs, and fat. There's healthy protein and there's unhealthy protein. Eating chicken, for example. Eating pork. Pork is good. It doesn't have nearly as much fat as, beef from a cow or whatever. So you can have your meat, but, you need to stay away from the red meat that has lots of fat. And the meats that don't have as much fat are pretty good. But there's so much evidence that saturated fats, both clinically and experimentally, can lead to a decrease in nitric oxide production. And that's what you want to avoid. It's very simple experiments to do in humans and lab animals and so on. So it's wise to keep the level down.
I would love to, while we're here kind of talking about it, I would love to get your take on, you said the carnivore diet is a deadly diet. That's a pretty big claim. I'd be curious to kind of hear your definition. Or
you have to understand where I'm coming from. I understand nutrition. I'm an expert in the cardiovascular system, and I'm a hell of a biochemist. Okay, and
absolutely,
I will say that. So I understand how the body handles saturated fat. And the body handles saturated fat in only one way: whenever you consume something, your digestive system breaks it down, right? So that it breaks it down into the smallest components, like fatty acids or amino acids, because those tiny molecules are the ones that can get through the membranes in your gastrointestinal tract and wind up in the blood. If you can't digest something, it just comes out in the feces. Okay, so the way your body metabolizes saturated fat is the fat goes to the liver and other organs and gets broken down into smaller fatty acids. And in those reactions, and all of those reactions are well known, in all those reactions, free radicals are produced. Okay, so if you're healthy, if you're healthy and you have your saturated fats, but you also have a fairly well-balanced diet, and you're of normal weight, and you don't have cardiovascular disease, you could probably handle that load of saturated fat, and all those free radicals formed are not going to destroy your cells and decrease your NO production.
I do see the majority of people that I see adopting the carnivore diet are very active, exercise very regularly, usually strength training. So they're not just bringing in all the saturated fat and then having a sedentary lifestyle. So I feel like that should support it, right?
Yes, but just because you're on a carnivore diet does not mean you have to eat Japanese Wagyu beef, which is the fattiest beef. I mean, I love it. Once every 6 months, I put in my calendar, go to Wolfgang Puck's Cut restaurant in Beverly Hills and have the biggest, fattest,
That's
Wagyu
a great
beef.
biannual anniversary.
I love it, but it's not going to kill me if I have it once in a while.
Amazing.
But you could have carnivore. The definition is what? You can Google it. It's meat. It's not fat. It's meat. You can eat meat every single day and be healthy. What kind of meat? Well, if you have pork twice a week, if you have lamb chops twice a week, and you have a lean cut of beef once a week, you're probably going to be fine.
I think this leads in perfectly to our next question, and that is, can we say Mediterranean food is the best way to live?
There's no question about it. And I'm not saying yes because I'm Mediterranean. You see, my mom and dad were born in Italy, and I was born in Brooklyn, New York, close to the water. So I'm kind of very Mediterranean. And so it's well known. I mean, every nutritionist, dietitian, physician will state, because of the evidence, not because they just feel like speaking.
Blue zone, centenarian.
Yes, the Mediterranean diet is the healthiest diet. And if you look at all the statistics, the number of what age do these people achieve? And even though they grow old, what's the incidence of cardiovascular disease? What's the incidence of diabetes? What's the incidence of dementia?
Their lifespan and health span are both very high, absolutely.
Very high. Okay, so why? Well, thousands and thousands of people have looked into this, and I've read so much of this, and it's very clear in my mind. Now, getting back to what we said before, carnivores, these people, they eat meat. I've been to Italy 50 times. They eat meat, but not a 24-ounce chunk of meat
tomahawk
with fat hanging around the edge. Do you know how they cook it? They cut all the fat off, then they cook it. Okay? That's a very big difference. They eat lots of chicken. Of course, the way the Mediterranean people get their protein is from fish. Fish is 100% protein. Every time you put a piece of fish in your mouth, all that meat, if I may call it that, is protein. The fish is protein.
Now, what about the
protein is
healthy fats in fish?
unsaturated fat. There's no unhealthy fat in fish. It's all polyunsaturated.
We're talking about omega-3s, right?
Omega-3 fatty acids. So that's part of the diet. But the key thing, in getting back to the carnivore diet, the big thing I want to state about the reasons why the Mediterranean diet is so healthy, the most factual, believe me, is these people eat lots of fresh fruits and vegetables. Fruits and vegetables are carbs, but the fruits and vegetables that have the most pronounced color are loaded with antioxidants. Antioxidants are chemicals. If you have each of these antioxidants in a jar as a chemical, it's going to have an extremely bright color. You can identify which fruits and vegetables have the most antioxidants.
How do we do that?
Just look at it. Pomegranate. Would you say pomegranate is dark? Try getting pomegranate juice on your white shirt. See if it comes off.
My wife is Persian, so I've had that happen many times.
Right, that's right, pomegranates. Yeah. So pomegranates, blueberries, strawberries, any kind of berry. If we go to the vegetable family, beets, try getting beet stains off, your nice white sweatshirt. So beets, arugula, kale, spinach, Brussels sprouts, dark green, right, dark color. That's why you have to have fruits and vegetables. I don't care how much meat you eat, just balance it with an equal amount of fruits and vegetables, and you'll sleep better for it, and you'll sleep longer.
So the next question, this one's a little bit longer, and we have somebody here, welcome to the internet, that doesn't agree with you. So this person writes, Ignarro makes certain claims that are untrue. The way NO release helps with erectile dysfunction was discovered completely by accident, not by him. When experimenters first gave sildenafil to people with heart problems, this is what it was originally designed for, he says, they reported having spontaneous, long-lasting erections as a side effect. Also, saturated fat does not by itself destroy NO. And I know we kind of just touched on that.
Yeah, we kind of discussed that.
Then they go on to say, the reason obese people and diabetics have atherosclerosis and ischemic heart disease is because both groups frequently suffer from both high blood pressure and insulin resistance. The obese are also known to eat junk food, trans fats, and seed oil produce, all of which damage the endothelium. Saturated fat and cholesterol are not the baddies they were made out to be for decades. Kind of a lot in there. How would you
about 2
that?
hours worth.
Yeah.
But we can kind of slice it. Where would you like me to start?
Let's go with
my claim.
Let's go back to the claim. The way NO release helps with erectile dysfunction was discovered completely by accident, not by him.
Okay, that's completely incorrect because you see, the Nobel Committee, the committee that awards the Nobel Prize, does not award the Nobel Prize simply for claims. The Nobel Committee awards prizes to those individuals who have made original discoveries themselves for the benefit of humankind. So, the action of NO in the treatment of erectile dysfunction was definitely not an accident. It's basic research that we did in our laboratory to show what causes erectile dysfunction, which is a lack of nitric oxide. The Pfizer pharmaceutical company was bright enough to look at the research we published and say, oh my goodness, we developed a drug about 5 years ago that works like nitric oxide to lower the blood pressure. But they didn't market the drug because every male patient who was on the drug, although they got a decrease in their blood pressure, developed an erection. The nurses were very aware of that in the clinic. This caused an incredible embarrassment to Pfizer.
Oh, wow.
I've spoken to many of those people since then. They didn't know how to deal with it on the product label. What do you say? Take the recommended dose of Viagra. Do not exceed the dose because you'll get an erection if you're a male. Well, all the men are going to triple the dose.
Yeah, not the scariest side effect I've ever heard.
No, exactly. Yeah. And so rather than deal with that, they decided to stop development of the drug. But this drug, to lower the blood pressure, produced an effect similar to nitric oxide. It wasn't nitric oxide, similar to nitric oxide. Okay? So when we came along and published our findings in 1992, which was a few years after Pfizer stopped developing their sildenafil drug, they realized, oh my goodness, our drug is working by boosting the action of nitric oxide in the penis, and that's why the patients developed an erection. So they decided to file a new drug application, NDA, this time for the treatment of ED, not hypertension.
I see.
They had already done all the toxicity studies, and they found the drug was safe. So the FDA fast-tracked the development of the drug, and in 1998 it was marketed as Viagra for the treatment of erectile dysfunction.
Okay.
Now, I have been to Pfizer many times. They've invited me there to discuss all this, and what they admit is that if I had not discovered that nitric oxide is released from the nerves to promote erectile function, they would have never taken that drug off the shelf and redeveloped it for Viagra, because they decided to stop developing it because they didn't know how to deal with the side effect. Now that side effect becomes the major effect, and if you take too much Viagra, you'll lower the blood pressure, you'll get dizzy. And now lowering the blood pressure is the side effect, whereas in the original drug development, it was the erection that was the side effect.
Wow.
Because they have both effects.
Okay. Well, thank you for clearing that up.
Yeah.
I feel like the rest of that statement we kind of touched on before, with saturated fat and all of that.
Right, of course.
Moving on to the next one. NO is used extensively in the ICU, intensive care unit, in all populations as one tool to improve gas exchange in the lungs and elevate PO2 in patients with ARDS, ARDS. I'm not familiar with what that stands for.
That's acute respiratory distress syndrome, a pulmonary problem.
Okay. And then they summarize or end it by saying it can be a lifesaver.
Sure.
How is NO used in ICU, and how does it relate to improving gas exchange in lungs and elevating PO2?
Sure. It's a long story, which I will abbreviate. As you pointed out earlier, nitric oxide is a gas. It doesn't come in a pill or a liquid. It's a gas, very unstable gas. It lasts for about 3 seconds. That's it. That's enough time for NO to produce its effect in the body, because it undergoes oxidative stress, oxidation. Free radicals, in the presence of free radicals, NO lasts for 1/100th of a second.
Does that even count?
Well, that's why I told you that if you have too many free radicals in the body, you wipe out your nitric oxide and it doesn't work anymore. We had discussed that. So anyway, commercially available is nitric oxide gas. Comes in a big cylinder. It's pure nitric oxide gas. And it can be used, it has to be diluted, it has to be mixed with air or oxygen, but that I'm going to call it INO, inhaled nitric oxide, with a mask that could be used to treat a number of pulmonary disorders. It was first discovered about 25 years ago at the Massachusetts General Hospital, where each year thousands and thousands of infants, newborns, when they're born, they have a blue color because their pulmonary arteries are constricted. There's not enough blood flow to their lungs to pick up oxygen, so they turn blue. And what was discovered, and so many of them died. So what was discovered is that if you give them just a tiny bit of inhaled nitric oxide, I was there witnessing this several times. The bodies turn from blue to bright pink before you can count to 10.
Wow.
It brought tears to my eyes. It was unbelievable.
And bright pink is good.
Yeah.
Way better than blue.
And so these kids, these infants, newborns, after a few days, they could go home. Their condition was cured.
Wow.
It's incredible. So this then led to the use of inhaled nitric oxide to treat other respiratory distress syndromes in adults. Okay,
like what?
ARDS. Well, it's just a deficiency of oxygen exchange. They don't have any specific names. I mean, they're called acute respiratory distress syndrome. People refer to them as ARDS. And nitric oxide works a little bit. It doesn't work in adults as well as it works in these infants. We don't know why, but in serious respiratory distress situations, the inhalation of nitric oxide gas can work.
Do you have to have a respiratory disorder in order to benefit from inhaled nitric oxide? Let's take me, for example, a standard healthy adult male.
Right.
If I inhaled a little bit of nitric oxide, would I get a breathing enhancement?
Yes.
Would it optimize my lung
Oh,
capacity?
yeah. It'll optimize your lung capacity. It'll increase.
Is it safe?
Nitric oxide relaxes smooth muscle. Okay, so your airways, the trachea, your airways have smooth muscle. So when nitric oxide is breathed in, inhaled, it widens the airways, so you get much more air, therefore more oxygen into your lungs. Nitric oxide also relaxes the arteries, that increases blood flow, right? The wider the artery, more blood. So now you have more blood and more oxygen in your lungs. You increase your oxygenation and your whole body, gets increased oxygenation. So your question was, is it safe?
Right, yes.
Only when given in the hospital setting by a professional technician who knows how to give nitric oxide. That's why you can't go use it at home when you're weightlifting.
I was going to say, I feel like this is where my mind kind of went, and some people might be going there as well, in terms of like a training aid or
of course.
A supplemental way to optimize my healthy lifestyle. If I could have like almost like an inhaler or a CPAP or something, just take a quick couple puffs to get these benefits and then go train. Okay. I feel like that is something that a lot of people would want.
Chase, you and I both. Hey, I'm 82 years old. Boy, could I use a boost of nitric oxide in my lungs and other places as well. It's just that we can't deal. The chemistry of nitric oxide is impossible to deal with commercially for those purposes. NO is a gas. Can't put it in a pill, can't put it in a capsule, can't put it in a liquid. But most importantly, the gas has a half-life. That is, it lasts for 3 seconds. So if they put it in a drink, it's going to be gone before they put the cap on the drink. You can't take nitric. The only way you could take nitric oxide is by controlled administration from a tank that has nitric oxide in the absence of oxygen. In the absence of oxygen, the NO lasts for 1,000 years. Soon as oxygen creeps in, the oxygen reacts with the nitric oxide to form other molecules and inactivates it. So you just, there's no device, no one knows how to design such a device where all of a sudden you have your nitric oxide.
I feel like if somebody could,
it's very difficult.
That's $1 billion idea.
Let me tell you, there are a couple of device companies looking into this, and I have seen what they're developing, and it looks great, but still big problems. And it's a handheld device that just contains air. Well, it contains a lot of things, but mainly it's got a chamber of air from the air and a spark plug.
A spark plug?
Let me explain.
And you're going to inhale that?
In the air, we have lots of nitric oxide, which is considered as a pollutant gas in the atmosphere. Before we knew NO existed in the body, we knew it was a pollutant gas
in the atmosphere.
So that's why when I first started to study nitric oxide in the 1970s, I couldn't get any money to do my research. Because the NIH thought, why do we want to give this guy money who's going to study a pollutant gas? Okay? They told me to go to some atmospheric agency to get money to study it. But the point I want to make is that during a lightning storm, when there's lightning, the lightning increases the reaction between the nitrogen in the air, right? The air has 80% nitrogen, right? It's 20% oxygen. So the lightning catalyzes the combination of N and O to make NO. That's why NO exists in the air. Okay, let's come down to earth now. We have a chamber, we have a device that has air in it, and a spark plug, where the spark plug is ignited to instantaneously make nitric oxide.
We're literally trying
in
to put
that
lightning in a
little
bottle.
Device.
Wow.
And as soon as you stimulate it, you breathe it in. Okay. Theoretically, it's beautiful. But operationally, we ain't there yet. Because
Fascinating.
if you make too much NO, it's toxic. You cause a big drop in your blood pressure because it's a vasodilator. If you cause a big drop in blood pressure, you stop delivery of blood to your brain. That ain't good. So we have to wait and see how these devices are developed. I'm always talking to these guys because I am hoping that before I have to go 6 feet under, I could have one of these devices. But I guarantee you when they first come out, it's going to be so prohibitively inexpensive that only the rich will be able to use them to work out.
Yeah, maybe
but
only
it's a great thing to hope for.
The most extreme biohackers. Have you heard of a gentleman, Brian Johnson?
Yeah.
Maybe somebody like him. He might be the only one.
Right. But before we leave this topic, if I may, Chase, we talked about inhaled nitric oxide. Mm-hmm. I wanted to emphasize, and this has gotten some public attention, but not the public attention it should have. During COVID, vaccines were developed to treat COVID-19, and they worked like a bandit. Whether you believe in vaccines or not, it still worked and saved millions and millions of lives. And in fact, last year, the Nobel Prize was awarded to the two people who discovered a new kind of messenger RNA that they used to make the vaccines for COVID-19.
Because COVID is a pulmonary...
pulmonary disease caused by a virus. Mm-hmm. And so I went to that Nobel. I was invited to go back, and I met these two people, and it was just great. A very well-deserved Nobel Prize for their original discovery. And I think the benefit to humankind was rather obvious. So let me say that in addition to the vaccines, inhaled nitric oxide, starting 2 years ago, was used very, very successfully in treating patients with severe COVID. It worked so well that it kept the patients out of the ICU, so that the beds in the ICU were more freely available to those people who were really sick and could not get the inhaled nitric oxide.
If I'm misunderstanding, excuse me, but let me ask you directly.
Yes.
So people that were in dire straits suffering from COVID, and what I will say, most likely, if you're going into the ICU, you have COVID and other symptoms, chronic illness, disease. What I witnessed during COVID time, people who, barring a few occasions, most of the people that suffered the most and unfortunately passed away from COVID also had a myriad of other pre-existing conditions, obesity, diabetes, other things like that. And this was kind of like the catalyst. Why didn't we hear about people using inhaled nitric oxide to alleviate a lot of this?
First of all, I would agree with half of what you said, not the other half. Yes, people with other conditions, cardiovascular disease, obesity, type 2 diabetes, they suffered the most when they got COVID. But over 50% of the patients who died from COVID were normal, or were apparently normal when they were admitted. They were not obese. They didn't have diabetes. COVID is a terrible situation. Let me explain, because it has to do with nitric oxide and the use of inhaled NO. When that SARS-CoV-2 virus, let's just say the COVID virus, when the COVID virus is inhaled, what it does is it attaches to the alveoli in your lungs where you have oxygen exchange, and it destroys the capillary network. It destroys the endothelial cells that line the capillaries. Those are the cells that make nitric oxide. So the COVID virus destroys the inner lining of the arteries, and this has been measured, of course, causes a huge drop in nitric oxide. So what is the result? Now, you'll be able to answer this based on what you all now know about the pharmacology of NO. Remember, NO is a bronchodilator. It widens the airways. So if you decrease NO in COVID, you constrict the airways. It becomes very difficult to breathe. Also, if you decrease your nitric oxide, you get a vasoconstriction. So you're decreasing the blood flow into the lungs. So now you have less blood, less oxygen, and you wind up in the ICU under oxygen, artificial respiration, mechanical, oxygenation, and so on. And it's due to the destruction of nitric oxide. The other thing is this, which we didn't touch on. We talked about NO being a vasodilator, bronchodilator.
Right.
But nitric oxide is a fantastic antiviral chemical.
Really?
Yes. It's the way, in your body, it's the way nitric oxide protects your lungs against viruses. That's why when you inhale through your nose, you get nitric oxide into your lungs. We could touch on that later.
So
but
maybe I was living under a rock, but why didn't I hear about NO being used in the treatment of COVID?
It was, I do not understand why. I really have come out against the press at Harvard University and several other places where these studies were done and published in the best of journals, and the inhaled nitric oxide was used in every clinic and hospital in the U.S. and in Europe, and especially in China, where there were so many people with COVID-19. And just to show you how safe it was and that the people didn't have to be obese and diabetic, the second clinical study, which was done in Massachusetts, brought in a whole bunch of pregnant women of normal health.
You can conduct clinical trials on pregnant women?
Yes, because they were ready to go into the ICU and die. They were volunteers.
Okay.
Approved by the university and the FDA. They went in, they were given inhaled nitric oxide. After about a week or two, their condition was cured. They did not have to go into the ICU. They went home, and every one of them gave birth to a perfectly healthy baby. And two of them had twins.
And mom and babies now, years later.
Fine, 2 years later.
Why have I not heard? Why has no one heard about this?
Why has no one heard about nitric oxide or Lou Ignarro? You answer that, and I'll answer your question.
Well, they will now. Hopefully we can get the same viewership on this one. Let's get a few hundred more thousand people to tune in.
Right.
I mean, that is
mind-boggling.
Unbelievable.
I know. Hey,
and also, not to get too political, I mean, because I know
I love
you
that.
do have, you are affiliated and you have relationships with Pfizer, and I know they have skin in the game, especially when it comes to COVID and vaccines. But I feel like to do that is a natural, I'm going to say, I think, way less expensive option to treat something as severe as ARDS and COVID. We didn't hear about it because there's no money in that, probably, right?
You mean the COVID treatment?
Right, yeah.
Oh, yeah. The inhaled nitric oxide is so expensive. First of all, it has to be performed in a hospital or clinic under supervision because NO can be toxic at the very high concentration. It has to be administered in a certain way, diluted a certain way, has to be monitored a certain way.
But if the people are in such dire straits already, they're already going to be in the hospital. They're already going to be getting that acute care. So I feel like at that point, we're already there.
Yeah, under those conditions, yes, many patients in hundreds of clinics throughout the United States and Europe and in China were given inhaled nitric oxide is very beneficial. However, if you look at ratios globally, but the vaccine saved the lives of, or the vaccine was used to treat patients with COVID by the hundreds of millions. The number of patients that were treated with the inhaled nitric oxide was more in the hundreds, maybe 1,000.
Why so low? Was that just
because there's just not enough of those machines around. Not every clinic has it. I think there's 40 places in the U.S. that have it, but they have one machine.
We need to get every hospital, every
they have one machine.
ICU to have an INO.
Hey, you're preaching to the choir.
I'm dumbfounded.
And COVID is going away now, but the beautiful thing about this finding, and I want everybody to keep this in mind, is that COVID is caused by a virus. So is the common cold. So is the flu. Can inhaled nitric oxide be used to treat the common cold and a flu before it gets worse and kills you, especially if you're old? This is why the biotech companies are trying to develop small units that can be kept at home to breathe nitric oxide, so that if you get a bad cold and you're aged, or you get a bad flu, you could take this yourself and maybe save your life. Believe me, that's $1 trillion market, and I just can't wait. I hope that comes to fruition someday, because NO is antiviral, not just vasodilator and this and that. We make NO to kill viruses in our body to sustain our lives.
You have given me a lot of homework to go check out. I'm seriously, I'm dumbfounded. I cannot believe that I or my peers, my wife even, she's a family nurse practitioner. I feel like even someone working in healthcare during COVID, this is all new information to me.
Yeah.
All right.
Good. I hope you get mad about it.
Why?
Why don't we know about it? Right. You think they would talk about it on the news, No.
Can we get nitric oxide over the counter?
I'm afraid you can't, for all the reasons I've been pointing out. Nitric oxide, again, is a gaseous material. You can buy gases in a can, but the thing is that it's a very unstable gas. It would last, for 3 seconds. And so even if the nitric oxide came in a can and there was no oxygen in it, as soon as you let it out, it would be inactivated before you could use it. Also, that's the primary thing. So you can't get it over the counter. You can't get it by prescription. The only way you can get pure nitric oxide is in a gas cylinder, and it has to be administered under incredible supervision.
Like we just kind of went through.
Yeah, and the FDA strictly controls for what reasons the NO gas can be used. However, I always tell people, you don't have to breathe in pure NO gas to reap the benefits of NO. All you have to do is to make sure that you are producing a normal amount of nitric oxide in your body. You don't need the external nitric oxide in a gas tank.
What is a normal amount?
You make a lot of it can't be defined in terms of amounts. I mean, we could talk about...
We can't go get a lab
picomolar
drawn.
or micromolar, but we can't, it doesn't make any sense.
It's not like a biomarker we can get, like our glucose or cholesterol. We can't...
Not yet. But
Not yet.
Again, industry is working on it. It's a tough molecule. This molecule is tough to deal with. Eventually, it will be a biomarker. And in fact, eventually, you'll be able to wear a device. If you like to work out, whether it's running...
A double dipping device is over here.
You'll be able to wear a device over certain muscle groups. And when you exercise, it can measure the amount of oxygen you're utilizing in the muscle and the amount of nitric oxide that you're producing.
I imagine this kind of being like, I'm not wearing one now, but I do a couple times a year. I wear a continuous glucose monitor in muscle to get real live feedback of metabolic health, glucose spikes and all of that. It could be something similar?
Yeah, and the company working on this is NOx. It's NNOXX.
Wow.
And they have some devices out, but it's not perfected yet. We just need to wait until they're perfected. But yeah, I do a lot of stationary biking indoors, when it rains. And I use a program called the Zwift. I'm really a big fan of, it's not the Peloton, it's much better. And I get my exercise that way. So I mount this device on my
Your quad?
My quad. And I could see the amount of, if I'm biking harder, climbing a hill, the amount of NO goes up and the amount of oxygen goes down because I'm utilizing the oxygen. And then when I stop, the NO goes down and the oxygen goes up as we get reoxygenation of the muscle. I love it, but maybe not that accurate
my
yet.
old exercise physiology days. What we call that EPOC, right? Excess post-oxygen consumption.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right. Moving on to L-citrulline and L-arginine.
Sure.
What are your comments on those two? Which one is better?
Okay.
I'm assuming they mean in terms of stimulating or helping create NO.
Yes. Yeah. Both of them are good. Let me explain, because an explanation will serve a great purpose, and you'll be able to understand why they're important in boosting NO production. Your body makes NO, right? We've been discussing that. Your body makes it. What does it make it from? It doesn't pull it out of the air. How does it make nitric oxide? Well, it makes it from an important amino acid that you consume whenever you eat protein, any kind of protein. The amino acid is arginine. Arginine, if Google the chemical structure, if you're interested, it has a lot of amino groups, a lot of nitrogens. one of those nitrogens is converted to NO. So nitric oxide is made from arginine. But it's interesting that when arginine is converted to NO, there's a second product that is formed in that reaction, citrulline. Citrulline is another amino acid. Citrulline is found in watermelon, all melons, but especially watermelon. So what happens is that citrulline can be reconverted quickly back to arginine. So think about this. You have a cell, like a blood vessel, in your arteries, arginine converted to NO plus citrulline. Citrulline is reconverted back to arginine, and that arginine makes more NO.
So it's like this
it's
self-feeding cycle.
A feed-forward cycle, a positive cycle. Mother Nature is beautiful. How could you have anything better than that? It's unbelievable. So why shouldn't you take arginine then? Why do you have to take arginine? Or citrulline, I should say. They're both good in boosting NO production. Citrulline is better. That was kind of a surprise 15 years ago, but now we know why. When you consume arginine, when you consume any foods, the food is digested, right, in your GI tract, and then all the little components get into the blood. So where does that blood go first? It goes to your liver. Your liver is a huge organ, and it's a detoxifying
Everything has to be
organ.
detoxified first, yeah.
Right, detoxified in the liver before the healthy stuff gets out into your blood. That's how the liver protects us against ingestion of poisons and other toxins. When the arginine goes into the liver, it's completely destroyed, 99% of it.
Really?
So only a small amount gets into the blood, very little, to make nitric oxide. Now, there are supplements available you could buy and take 5 grams, 5,000 milligrams, and you'll make NO.
Yeah, so does supplementing your diet with arginine actually have any effect because the liver metabolizes so much of it?
A small effect, but a positive effect. It's been measured. But the better product is citrulline, because citrulline, when it goes through the liver, is untouched by the liver. So all of the citrulline you consume goes right into the blood. And remember I told you the citrulline is converted to arginine in the cells.
So in the end, it's all the same.
Yeah, but you get much more NO produced if you consume citrulline than if you consume arginine.
Wow.
That's been measured. A lot of people did that. So if you take a spoonful of arginine and a spoonful of citrulline, consume each one separately and measure, it's complicated, and measure your NO, you get maybe 5 times more NO with citrulline than arginine. So many products in the market now.
That's why many pre-workouts and supplements like this is citrulline, yeah.
Oh, yeah. And the most popular group of athletes who take these supplements to boost their exercise performance and endurance are weightlifters. Apparently, weightlifters, they claim that they get an incredible boost.
Oh, yeah.
Taking
I'm one of them, yeah.
Taking these products, and they get less pain after a while because it improves circulation. And that washes out your lactic acid and all your other
decreased recovery time,
right?
Decreased muscle soreness, increased endurance.
Right.
For my next question, I'm going to get, this one really blew my mind. It's one of those things that I'd kind of heard some stuff about in terms of breathing differently through our mouth, through our nose, humming, and nitric oxide production. I have a prop for this one. It's in my bag. Excuse me, guys. I got to grab this. All right. So the exact question is, breathe through or the statement rather, is breathe through your nose increases NO. So what about mouth breathing versus nasal breathing?
Okay.
Now, and this is where we're going to bring the science to an application that I've been using for a while. Have you ever seen these mouth tape, basically? So
yes, I think so.
I use this brand, shout out Elevate, and I've been using it for almost a year now. And so what you do at night, it's meant to put on your mouth so you don't mouth breathe at night.
Hey.
And you put it on like this.
Oh, so it forces you to breathe through your nose.
So you have to breathe through your nose at night. Now, I was doing it to improve my sleep. I get measurable, better sleep. But now I'm learning this is perhaps increasing nitric oxide production as well.
Absolutely. That's why you're getting better sleep, I think. Okay, so this was a discovery made by a couple of friends of mine in Stockholm at the Karolinska Institute 15 years ago. Your nasal mucosal cells in the nose, the nasal cavity makes very large amounts of NO gas. And that diffuses into your nasal cavity. So if you inhale or breathe through your nose, all that nitric oxide is immediately delivered into your lungs, well within the 3-second period where the NO would be destroyed. So your nasal mucosal cells make NO, that goes into the lungs. Now, we talked about this. Why did Mother Nature give us this? Why does our nasal mucosa make
And why only
NO?
breathing through our nose, not our mouth?
And you don't make any breathing through your mouth. Okay, but the answer to the first question is more apparent than the second. When you breathe the NO through your nose, that nitric oxide, again, we can't ask God for the answer. So, as scientists, we have to think that the reason we make NO in the nasal cavity and breathe it into your lungs is 3 reasons. And I've mentioned those already. 1, increase the airway diameter to get more oxygen, more air, right? Air contains oxygen.
To literally be able to breathe
in more. Secondly, you improve blood flow because NO's a vasodilator. So you have more blood. What's the use of increasing your oxygen if you don't have any blood there to pick it up? So if you increase the blood and the oxygen, you get delivery of oxygen throughout your body. And the third reason, and most pathologists believe that the third reason is the more important reason. We make the NO in the nose to keep our lungs free of viral infection.
So having more NO at the front line of inhalation decreases our potential probability of contracting viruses?
Right, because the NO can destroy a whole host of viruses, not just COVID-19 virus, as I explained earlier. Remember, with the inhaled nitric oxide, treatment of COVID, the NO acts as an antiviral to kill the virus. So every day, if you can inhale through your nose, especially when you sleep or even during the day, you are offering that much more protection against the possibility of getting a common cold, influenza, or any other type of respiratory problem caused by a virus.
So this is what they say.
This is very important.
I hear when I go to yoga classes or I do breath work, I hear all of these claims that now make sense. I've never heard this explanation. By deep breathing through your nose increases or enhances your immune system. I've always just kind of gone, okay, but this is why.
That's why. See, because when you say enhances your immune system, it's not an accurate term because there are 100 different reactions in the immune system. What it does is protects you against viruses. That's an immunological.
Absolutely.
That's an immune response. So yes, it increases your immune system because it fights viruses and bacteria, by the way. I don't want to single out the viruses. Nitric oxide is very good at killing and knocking off bacteria and preventing bacteria from replicating or dividing.
This is incredible.
Could be a very important reason for breathing in through your nose. Also, when you exercise, it's good to breathe in through your nose. Now, that has nothing to do with the antiviral effect.
Many people use mouth tape such as this during exercise as well.
When you exercise, you want to dilate your blood vessels. You want increased air, increased blood flow. So try as best you can to inhale through your nose instead of your mouth. But it's very difficult. Sometimes you just have to breathe in through your mouth in order to get that increased volume in, which is more efficient. Now, you use that to you better sleep. And honestly, what is it? It could be a variety of things. But right now, the only thing we know of for sure is the increase in nitric oxide delivery to your lungs. NO has a lot of pulmonary effects. If you increase oxygenation and delivery of oxygen throughout the body, wouldn't that give you a more restful sleep? I think so. That NO could affect other cells in the brain to give you a more restful sleep. I mean, I'm sure there are other explanations, but clearly, this is one of them. Now, I don't use the tape. I just want to say what I use. It's a Swedish product. It's a, I forget. It's called Breathe Right. Breathe Right.
I've heard of this. Yeah,
It's a tape
goes over the bridge of the nose.
That has a rigid construction, and so what you do is you squeeze it over your nose, and then it pops out. It's like elastic and opens up your nostrils. So I used to use that whenever I ran my marathons, and I swear that helped me.
Let me before we move on and kind of getting towards the end here, I think we have one or two more questions.
Okay.
Let me define by what I mean, my personal experience by using mouth tape at night. When I say I'm getting better sleep, what I noticed when I first started was I use a Whoop, this wearable activity tracker on my wrist here. I'm using it for almost 5 years now. And I got measurable better sleep in terms of my sleep efficiency went up. I had longer and more deep sleep, all sleep cycles, REM. But the biggest thing for me was I am getting by with less sleep. Traditionally, for years, I prioritize sleep a lot, and I have really made the same bedtime and same awake time as consistent as possible for about 4 or 5 years. And for me, that means bed 10 to 10:30, and I'm usually waking up 7:15 to 8 a.m.-ish. When I started mouth taping, that went to me waking up naturally with the same, if not more, energy and ready to go by about 20 to 45 minutes sooner.
Wow.
So
Excellent.
I am waking up. So this tells me I'm getting better night's sleep. My Whoop tells me I'm getting a better night's sleep.
Okay.
I feel energized, ready to go. But it's also amazing because I'm getting more time back in my day.
Yes.
I'm waking up
good.
sooner. I can start the day, get to work, go meditate, go take the dog out, do whatever. It's been fantastic. But now I'm understanding it's because I'm getting more nitric oxide.
It could be.
And better recovery from workouts as well. I'm not waking up anywhere near as sore or need more recovery time.
Because you could blame it on the vasodilator effect of NO. Many people, I'm not pushing supplements, but many people take these arginine supplements, citrulline
Panax
supplements.
ginseng.
Oh, there's so many of them. Nightworks by Herbalife.
What about cordyceps? What's your take on cordyceps, the functional mushroom? So it's a functional mushroom, and it's a natural vasodilator.
Right. I can't comment on that. The only thing I can comment on, or the only products I can comment on, are the ones I understand mostly, and that's the ones that generate NO. For example, beetroot juice, products like that.
I put beet powder in my post-workout smoothies.
That's been shown clinically.
Every time,
Measurements have been made to boost NO. So, but other supplements, arginine, citrulline. My wife never misses a dose. She likes to double the dose of her arginine and citrulline every day, and she swears that she gets such an incredible night's sleep that she could. And
she takes it at night.
She takes it an hour before she goes to bed, but you don't, because I take it in the morning, and it works for me too. But what she says is that she's able now, she goes to bed early every night anyway, between 8 and 9 o'clock. But she was having to get up like at 6 in the morning, and that was taking a lot of time out of our day because we have 2 dogs we like to walk and feed, and they're getting up. Now, after taking the supplements, she's up at 4 o'clock every morning, without an alarm.
Wow.
Not me. I'm saying what she does, and then I get up a half hour later.
Amazing.
And she has and she feels great for the rest of the day.
So many possible applications here.
Yeah, I blame it all on nitric oxide,
The house that NO built over there.
Exactly.
Well, Dr. Lou, as we kind of get towards the end here, I just want to say what an outstanding career you've had. What a contribution to society, to human performance, to longevity, to endurance, to sleep. I mean, I feel like you've had decades in the world, and we're still now finding applications and understandings of why and how NO works, how to use it for endurance, recovery, sleep, viruses. I'm so excited to see where this goes, and so excited to see where you continue to take it.
Sure. Joe, thank you.
I want to get into one other unique item here about NO. That was a question. Some of these we've already kind of touched on in terms of it's toxic and only lasts a few seconds. Then how did you create it? And we've kind of went over all that. I would love to really talk about humming. Can humming create nitric oxide in the body?
It absolutely can. When this study was first published, it was published by the same group that published about 15 years ago that your nasal mucosal cells make nitric oxide. What they discovered is that humming increases that NO production by 15-fold.
Not 15%, 15 times.
Fold. 15 times. So their names are Yun and Eddie. So I looked at that. I had scheduled a trip to Stockholm to meet with them for other reasons. You know, we're good friends. And I said, listen, guys, I don't believe this. When I come to Stockholm, I want you to demonstrate that in front of me. And they did. They have devices that measure nitric oxide production in your nasal cavity, all kinds of sophisticated instrumentation. And so they did it with no humming. They did it with a little bit of humming. They did it with lots of humming. And sure enough, the more you hummed, the more nitric oxide you produce. And it went up to 20 times.
Now, can we define humming? Does it need to be in a certain tone for a certain duration?
What it has to be is keeping the opening of your mouth. It's closing your mouth. Okay, I'm going to do it sort of on the air. And so when you make that humming sound, you are exhaling through your nose, right? But you're creating tremendous vibrations. It's the vibration that stimulates these special mucosal cells to make more nitric oxide. And the precise enzymatic mechanism, which I will not describe here, was worked out, and they published it. And it happens not only in humans, but it also happens, where did it happen? In cows that moo. They were able to measure the nitric oxide. Oh, I'd like to see that set up.
Excuse me. So cows aren't mooing; they're humming.
Well, because they have their mouth shut, and so I didn't know this. But
so do cows have a leg up on NO?
In many cases, the noise is a part of it's coming out of the nose. The snout, is that what you call it? And part of it is coming out of the mouth. It's both. But it's the tremendous vibration in the face that causes this increase in nitric oxide.
I've also heard humming being used and recommended for people to introduce a calmer state. I've heard that humming can stimulate the vagus nerve, which helps kind of activate more parasympathetic nervous system activity.
Okay.
So for high stress, high anxiety, panic attacks, to kind of just dropping in, so to speak.
I'm not too familiar with that, but yes, that makes good sense. And for those of us, those of you, because I don't do it, yoga. I can't practice yoga because I cannot move my limbs in those sorts of positions.
Oh, that's exactly why you
winding
should,
up
Dr.
in the
Lou.
hospital. I
was the same way. That's why I started.
Oh God, maybe I should try it. But anyway, there are all kinds of things I've been doing in yoga for hundreds of years.
Thousands.
And never knew anything about nitric oxide. I mean, they're humming. They
so many different practices with the fingers and blocking
with the
certain
fingers,
nostrils.
But I hear my wife does yoga, and at the end of each yoga class, she's going. That's a form of humming. Anything, right, that increases the vibration in the nose. But to take advantage of that, if you're going to make all those sounds and have people turn around and look at you, what you need to do is as soon as you finish making the sound, inhale through your nose. You just made a ton of nitric oxide. Don't waste it. Make your humming sound and then breathe in.
Can we? This is the perfect way as we wrap up.
That takes a lot of work.
Can we? Would you do a hum inhale with me? Let's wrap up by boosting
let's
our
do
NO.
that.
Okay.
and then breathe out through your mouth. Because if you breathe out through your nose, you're going to drive the nitric oxide out of your nose. But there's none in your mouth, so breathe out through your mouth.
So if somebody wanted to boost nitric oxide in their body for whatever reason, for sleep, for working out, they could, without reaching for beats or any supplement, they could just hum inhale, and mouth exhale.
Exactly. And hope the police don't come to the front door.
Well, Dr. Lou, this has been incredible. I'm so honored to have you back here on the show. Maybe if we get a bunch of more questions for this one, we'll have to do round 3.
Yeah, I'd love to. I love talking about nitric oxide. I want nitric oxide to become a household word. So few people know what nitric oxide is and how beneficial it could be for your health and longevity. So the more chances I get to explain to the world what nitric oxide is and how easy it is for you to boost your NO, the happier I am. So thank you for having me.
Let's make the tagline in every home. Let's say yes to no.
Say yes to no.
Say yes to
I'm
no.
all for that.
My last question, Lou, is maybe you remember this from our first interview. My goal in every episode in bringing people on the show is to highlight unique areas of life, expertise, experience that my audience and myself can practically apply to their life in one way or many ways to help move our life forward and to keep moving ever forward. Ever forward, those 2 words today, sir. What do they mean to you? How do you live a life ever forward?
Well, I live a life ever forward, taking advantage of my own physiology, what my body can do. I try to do whatever I can do to maximize the efficiency of my body, whether it's my brain, thinking clearly, getting a good night's sleep, being able to make better informed decisions the next day. I would like to live longer to continue to make my contributions to humankind. How do I do that? Well, I can do that by paying careful attention to what I eat and what I drink, I might add, and also not sitting down all the time. Walking as much as I can, and also riding my bike as much as I can. So, that's sort of ever forward for me. It's very simple. It's very easy to do. Your body can do it. You just have to want to do it.
Never a right or a wrong answer, I say. I appreciate every interpretation. Thank you so much.